Hello, my name is Maggie Delaire. I have chosen to do my project on Disney's 1937 Snow White, the first animated film in US history. I chose it because, to be honest, I have a romantic side sometimes. I'd love to sit down and watch a good Pride and Prejudice or enjoy some Gone with the Wind, and sometimes some action movies just don't do it for me. It doesn't really make any sense. I jumped sort of at the idea of having the chance to do a podcast, which I turned this into a video because I just knew that I'd listen to my voice over and over again, and why not just accompanying it with my facial expressions. I swear I'm not usually this stuttery. So I watched the movie through, took some notes, and I have a review of it. I have not watched this movie in a very long time. Back when I was a child, my parents did not allow me to watch it as they thought it was too scary. And I believe I watched it for the first time when I was about 11 or 12. And to be honest, it did kind of scare me a little bit. But I grew up as an extremely sheltered child, so it was not much of a surprise at all. Watching it again, and now knowing what I do know about how much work it takes to put into the animation and like making the scenes flow together, the storyline, I really admire what these people were able to do. The director of this oh my goodness, what is it called? This movie. His name is, where is it? David Hand. And there are a lot of animators. There are 7 chief animators and probably about twice the amount of just regular animators. And here's fun fact, there were only over 2 million sketches made for this film. Like 2 million sketches made by 750 different artists. Unfortunately, only 250,000 drawings were actually included in the film, but that's still just an enormous amount of drawings to fit into a 1.5 hour length feature film, which is very impressive, especially for that time. You can only imagine the dedication and grunt work that went into producing this movie. Actually, all the critics thought that this movie would fail. They nicknamed it Disney's Folly. And that was because Walt Disney ended up having to mortgage his house in order to provide the budget needed for securing this film. Apparently, there was a lot that went into it that was basically teetering on this line of, will this movie happen or not? Like, the critics are against it. One of the chief animators almost quit twice, apparently, because 2 of his favorite scenes were cut, and he wasn't feeling it anymore. He didn't want to go on with animating this film when people weren't really seeing his creative ingenious and imagination. But he stuck with it, and let's not shut down. Thank you. My apologies. My computer can be a little bit iffy sometimes. So, watching through the movie, there are some interesting themes that I sort of picked up on. Generally, when you think of Disney princesses today, with the changing societal view on women and their role in society, and what they should wear, what they should think, what young girls should grow up in the shadow of. Back then we had the stay-at-home mother, the World War II, because this film was released, I believe, before World War. Was it before the World War? Was it 1 or 2? Oh, I'm not redoing this again. I've redone it 3 times already. But it was released in 1937. So, yes, World War II. So it was actually re-released a couple of times during the World War, just to sort of spur the soldiers' excitement and keep morale up. In some countries, children weren't even allowed to go see this movie by themselves, like my parents did for me, because they thought it was too scary. So children under 16 had to be accompanied by a parent in order to see this movie, which is really interesting. I mean, to be fair, there isn't really a gruesome scene in the movie, but the overall implication of the death and despair that this evil stepmother queen brought upon this land. You can see that in the connotations of when the queen is entering the basement dungeon to brew up the potions in order to spell Snow White. You see the skeletons, and at one point she walks past one of the skeletons and goes thirsty and kicks away a water jug or something that just like really hits home. This woman is evil. My apologies, my dog is snoring in the corner. So, like I said earlier about how the view of the world around women has been changing, and messages in movies have been a lot more empowering and in the media, and this movie is, instead of taking into a point where your destiny is in your own hands and you're the one that decides, this movie is sort of fate and destiny. And there are a lot of unseen forces that make the things in this movie happen the way they do. For example, I noticed in the beginning, Snow White, she's beautiful. She was born with this beauty. This beauty attracts the prince. He sees her, even though she's dressed in rags, she's so beautiful that the prince stops to listen to her sing. She's gifted with a beautiful voice, and to look at her and to romance her, basically. The queen becomes increasingly jealous of this, sends her away. She sends a huntsman after her. The huntsman, unfortunately, I don't think that it was really the beauty of Snow White that influenced his decision on to kill her or not, because I remember his line was, forgive me, I could never go through with this. And this is different from the original story, because in the original Brothers Grimm tale, Snow White actually gets out of this with her wits, instead of just sort of cowering and going, oh no, I'm going to be killed. Apparently she promises the huntsman in the Brothers Grimm story that they collected from Germany that she would run away and never be seen again. And then the huntsman is like, okay, and he takes an animal's heart, which in the movie is a pig's heart, and I believe that is the same in the Brothers Grimm's tale. A pig's heart is taken. Snow White has been sort of dumbed down, perhaps. So in this film, she's not quite the quick-witted girl who gets out of things on her own, and instead she is like dulled down to the early 1900s housewife that would be what most men would want to see in these. Like, you don't want to see a girl making her own decisions and ramping around and like thwarting her own stepmother out of a kingdom, or making her own decisions on who she wishes to marry and who she doesn't, because that would be too much, honestly, for that time. Which brings the question, where is Snow White's father through this film? Where is he? It's mentioned that he remarries. Obviously he does, because if Snow White has a stepmother, then she at one point had a father who remarried. In the original Brothers Grimm tale, it is said that Snow White's mother pricked her finger while sewing or something, 3 drops of blood fell out, and she wished for a daughter who had qualities: blood red lips, pale skin, black hair, and along came Snow White. But the mother died in childbirth, so that is how Snow White came about. And then there's no detail on her father. Who is Snow White's father? Where is he? Why is he so absent? That's like a lot of unanswered questions in this film. The queen somehow, there is no really discernible relationship that Snow White and the queen really have, because like, how naive is this girl? She knows that she's the princess because the huntsman tells her she's a princess. She introduces herself to the dwarves as a princess. That she must know that she belongs in the royal family. Is she afraid to step up? Why wasn't she afraid before when she was just living with the queen? Is there a reason? That never gets really answered throughout the film. Why was their relationship the way it was? Why did Snow White never like try to make amends? Like, you'd think that a child, like a parentless child, would do, is just try to look up to that one motherly figure in their life. And we never get that answered. Then we have like a lot of musical numbers. that almost seem like fluff in this movie, because there's the bare bones story, and then there's a point where you feel like it's being dragged on. And I did feel that at several points throughout the film, especially when Snow White was with the dwarves for so long. And I believe they went on about a hand washing sequence for about 10 minutes about how they need to wash their hands. And then they ended up washing them whole, like themselves whole. They were throwing themselves into the trough. They were scrubbing each other with their clothes on. And you were just like, what's going on during all this? What is the purpose? Other than to communicate to children, perhaps, of the time that they needed to clean up for dinner, like these little dwarves did, because Snow White is so sweet and she made them dinner, and she got home and she immediately knew her place. She cooked and she cleaned and she was beautiful. That was all she needed to be, and she was lucky that she was that way, because if she hadn't been beautiful, then she would have been dead. For that is how the dwarves had found her. They had walked upstairs and they had all of their pitchforks and pickaxes and whatever ready to stab whatever they thought was intruding their house. There was again, 15 minutes on them just having a whole sequence of walking home, thinking there's someone in the house, and then freaking out about somebody being in the house, all while making definitely the most noise ever, and Snow White never wakes up. She wakes up, however, by somebody, like, just barely touching her. Or, like, this girl, she probably already had some cognitive issues that induced sleep, and maybe it wasn't just the poisoned apple that was given to her. Perhaps she was an insomniac. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just speculating at this point. But the dwarves did not kill her because of her beauty. You can see as they pull back the covers and they're about to strike, and Snow White is there, and she's beautiful. And then that's the exact next thing that they say. They go, well, it's a girl. And somebody else, one of the other dwarves, adds a very pretty girl. So would they have killed her had she been ugly? They probably would have. They probably would have thought she was a hag. And that is another thing that's out of Snow White's hands. She could not determine her own beauty, and thus plays through this theme of there being some otherworldly force that is throwing Snow White along in her life, and she's really getting, like, not drawing the short straw, except for having an evil stepmother that wants her dead and put her as a scullery maid and etc. But we won't pay attention to that. She's having a lot of luck. Perhaps karma's, like, trying to make things equal. So we don't see the evil queen for a good 45 minutes of the hour-and-a-half movie. She sends Snow White away, and then Snow White gets into the woods, and then all of a sudden the evil queen is back. And I'm just thinking, why? Why is the evil queen back? This is so random. Like, does she only check in on, like, Snow White every now and then? Does she only ask her magic mirror every now and then? In the Brothers Grimm story, it details that every 10 years was when the queen asked the mirror. She asked the mirror, and this was when Snow White was like 14 or something. And then she sent Snow White away, and then 10 years later, she asked about Snow White, and the mirror's like, oh, there's this maiden in the forest that's beautiful. And you're like, does this, and in the movie you're just like thinking, oh, does this queen have a schedule? Does she wake up every morning and base her entire morning around being vain? Because that seems to be her only personality trait, is being evil and being vain. And I mean, I guess in a time where things could be black and white and the story can still be charming, then sure, we don't need to look for any more complicated plot in this. This is just a movie for children to teach you not to talk to strangers, right? But for the average adult watching it, you do want to think deeper into the movie. But yes, later on in the movie, things are once again out of everyone's hands. The evil queen does make the choice to turn herself into an old hag. And as she transforms into an old hag, she never turns back into the queen. That is the last time you see her as a queen in the whole movie, is heading down into the dungeon where you see the skeletons, and perhaps that represents the death of the queen as being beautiful, and like she's finally descended into some real insanity, as if the insanity of ordering her stepdaughter's death and forcing her to live as a scullery maid wasn't enough. Then she's got to do it herself, because I mean, if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. That's a popular saying. Everyone knows that. And this is figurative. She turns into an old hag literally, and she always was an old hag. She basically just became what was inside of her, which would have worked really well for an Ugly Duckling storyline as well. But I don't think that the two movies would have meshed that well. But perhaps we could have like some surprise appearances now and then. Also, something before I go on about the Evil Queen's death really quick. The animals. What's with the animals? Is this some sort of fantastical realm? Because there are dwarves, but that's really the only sort of mystical creature that appears. You see your regular forest animals. You see the chickadees, and you see the bluebirds and the deer and the squirrels and the chipmunks and the cute little bunnies that help you sweep and clean your house or whatever. And Snow White can talk to these animals. And the dwarves mention dragons and demons and ghosts, but we never see them throughout the movie. So you feel a little gypped, especially if like you're sitting there and you're going, man, that would be a really cool thing to see these animals and these magical creatures appear instead of this just being sort of like a little village where some girl like it's totally centered around her. Like, come on, we want some sort of Middle Earth, give me the Ring vibe to this movie. I think that could really be taken in another direction, which it has been. Of course, this movie's been developed into different things, but not quite that one yet. Yeah, so anyways, back to the Evil Queen. She goes after Snow White. She poses as a woman that's in trouble. She's in trouble, she's feeling sick, she's just an old hag, and of course, because Snow White is so selfless and so kind and so naive, she takes her in, even though she was warned not to. And as a result, Snow White eats this apple, and the Evil Queen goes and tries to prevent the dwarves from reaching Snow White, and she's trying to push this boulder off of a hill, and then lightning comes out of the sky and strikes her off that cliff. Somebody else said, no, you can't do any more to this girl. I've had enough. I've made her live her whole life as a scullery maid, and she's lived her life in fear of you, but I guess now I've had enough of it. It's time for her happily ever after. And this is out of everyone's control. Nobody could have told that lightning to strike anywhere else. It just so happened that way. And perhaps it would have been different if Snow White hadn't been born beautiful. None of this would have happened. Perhaps the lightning still would have struck, but nobody would have stood there that day. Or perhaps one of the birds would have been sitting on the ledge and they would have fallen. But they would have flown because they were a bird, so that was a bad example. The strange burial of Snow White in the glass casket is also a significant reminder of the fact that her beauty made her different from everyone else. Usually when a person dies, you put them in a casket and you bury them underground and you're like, goodbye, good night, you were great, I really don't want to see you decompose. But they put her in this glass box, even though they're like, oh yeah, she's sleeping, but she probably will never wake up. And she's just in a glass box. Like, come on. So that people can look at her? Like, she's a museum artifact. It just serves to show that, like, beauty's like a huge aspect of this girl. It's mentioned like every 5 seconds throughout the movie. And then none of the dwarves try to stop the prince when he comes up and he's like, oh yeah, like, I'm a prince. I'm just gonna kiss her and see if she's gonna wake up or not. In the original Brothers Grimm, there wasn't even a kiss from a prince that woke her up. She was being carried in a casket because the prince thought she was pretty and brought her back to his castle because she was pretty. He brought her back to his castle, and while they're bumping along the road carrying her casket, the apple dislodged out of her throat. But in this movie, it's because of the kiss, which makes a lot more sense, actually. If there was a poisoned apple and it was made by black magic, it would make more sense to have a kiss that would revive it, or some sort of like true positive attribute instead of it just falling out of your throat. Because does the poison just stay with the apple? Is this girl terrible at swallowing? I don't know. Maybe she asphyxiated or something. But overall, I think that it's a classic. And it's a classic not only because of like the storyline that was plucked from a really long time ago, so long ago that we don't even really know exactly where it originated from. and turned it into this feature-length film with so much work put into it by the animators and the directors and even Walt Disney himself, like sacrificing his house for this film. It is hard not to commend it because of the team effort that was put into it. But for the storyline, it perhaps it's because it doesn't line up quite as well with modern day expectations of a film. If I had to rate it, it's not something that I watch every day. It's not even something I'd watch once a year. Perhaps like once every couple of years when I remember, oh yeah, there's this movie and I need to remember the plot because it's a really important part of US history. Come on. But a good movie for the animation work, beautiful scenery, design, and kind of a meh for the story. They could have done a lot more with it, but that's just my opinion. Thank you for listening to this very stumbly podcast / video that I've done here. My apologies again for the constant background noise. I thought everyone would be asleep, so they would be quiet, but apparently this house is loud even when it's 11:08 p.m. Signing off.